Close your eyes for a moment and let me place you on the oldest kind of road, water. You are in southern Mesopotamia, where the Euphrates spreads across a flat alluvial plain, and people survive because they persuade a river to behave. There are no stone hills here, only silt, sky, and heat. The horizon is a straight line broken by date palms, reed beds, and temple platforms rising above the fields. In this world, a king's power is measured in canals. Who digs them? Who maintains them? Who controls the gates? And who keeps the harvest from drying into dust? Now imagine you are not a king, not a priest, not a scribe. You are born a farmer in the Babylonian kingdom during the reign of Hammurabi. In the early 18th century BCE, you will learn the taste of barley bread, the sound of water moving through a narrow ditch at night, and the weight of obligations written on clay. You will also be pulled into the machinery of a growing state, labor drafts, court disputes, and military campaigns that reach from the marshy south to the northern bend of the Euphrates. This is your life as it might have unfolded, told to you as if you are the one living it, not a fairy tale, but a grounded reconstruction. The geography, the work, the law, the wars, the cities, and the ordinary courage of staying alive between flood and famine. Channel note: if you are not subscribed, please subscribe and like this video. It directly supports the continuation of this series, and it helps us bring you more historically grounded stories told from the inside. Part 1. The mud, the water, and your first name. Before you know the word Babylon, you know mud. You know the cool squeeze of river clay between your toes, the way it dries into a crust on your ankles, and the way your mother scrapes it off with a reed sliver while the evening light turns the canal into copper. You are born in a village on a low ridge beside an irrigation channel that branches from the Euphrates. The ridge is only a little higher than the fields, but it keeps your house above the worst floods. Around you, the land is a patchwork of barley plots, date palms, and narrow vegetable beds. If you could rise above the village like a bird, the map would make sense at once. To the west is steppe, a dry belt of scrub and wind where shepherds move sheep and goats between sparse grazing. To the east, the flat land slowly firms up, and far beyond, the Zagros Mountains sit hazy blue on clear days. People say those mountains hold stone, timber, and tribes who trade, raid, and sometimes serve as soldiers. To the south, the land becomes wetter, and travelers talk about reed seas and marshes where boats slip through green walls. To the north, the river bends toward older towns and new frontiers. In your earliest years, time is counted by water and work. When the river swells, men watch the embankments like a parent watching a feverish child. If the water is guided safely into canals, the whole village exhales. If it breaks loose, it takes what it wants: seed, mudbrick, sometimes an animal, sometimes a person. You learn early that the Euphrates is not only a river, it is an unpredictable force older than Hammurabi, older than any crown, and everyone serves it. Your home is mud brick rooms around a small courtyard. The walls are thick and plastered smooth. In the hot season, the inside stays cooler than the yard. The roof is flat, supported by beams, reeds, and packed clay. In summer, you sleep up there under stars that feel close. In winter, you huddle inside, the hearth a small red eye in the dark. Your mother bakes barley bread on a hot clay plate and stews lentils with onions when there are onions. Meat is rare. Animals are savings on legs. The village is small, but it is not isolated. A canal links you to other settlements. and the river links all of you to Babylon. Traders pass with donkeys carrying wool and jars of oil. Fishermen pull nets from quiet backwaters. Sometimes a boat slides by low in the water with sacks of grain, its crew pushing with long poles. And every year, after harvest, officials come. One is a scribe with a stylus and a clay tablet. The signs he presses into wet clay are small, but the power behind them is heavy. He measures and records what your household owes. When the scribe finishes, he presses the tablet with a cylinder seal, rolling a carved image across the clay like a signature. You watch that small act with fascination. The seal might show a god standing on a mountain, or a king receiving a rod and ring, or animals in a line. It is art, but it is also authority. Later, you will understand that seals, witnesses, and tablets are how Babylon stretches its reach into a village like yours without sending soldiers every day. A few impressions in clay can decide who owns a field, who owes silver, who is blamed when a canal bank fails. You begin to recognize the textures of your world. Wool scratches your skin in summer and comforts you in winter. Bronze is precious. Most tools are wood and stone with bronze edges that must be guarded. A plow is a shared asset, a thing families argue over because it decides when you can plant. You learn to count bundles of reeds, measures of grain, days of labor, not because you love numbers, but because numbers determine whether your family keeps its land. The temple is the tallest thing you know. It has a swept courtyard, storerooms that smell of grain and incense, and priests who speak the names of gods as if the names themselves are tools. You hear of Shamash in Sippar and Marduk in Babylon, whose city is rising. In your village, the gods are close and practical. You pour a little beer on the ground before a journey. You tie an amulet to your wrist when fever comes. You do not debate belief. You live inside it. As a child, you work without calling it work. You scare birds from barley by clacking stones together. You carry water in a jar that bumps your hip. You help patch a breach in a field ditch, stamping mud with your heels while adults argue about whose section failed first. You learn the sound of healthy flow, a steady rush, not a desperate gurgle. You learn what salt looks like on soil, white and deadly, and you understand why elders fear neglect more than hunger. You also learn that a village is held together by obligation. When someone's roof collapses, neighbors arrive with reeds and mud. When a man dies, his brothers argue over land and the elders mediate. When a child is born, women bring bread, beer, and advice, and the baby receives a name that is both personal and protective, often invoking a god. Your own name is spoken with hope, because names are a kind of prayer. At night, your father tells you stories, because stories are how people travel. He talks about Babylon as if it is another world, thick walls, crowded markets, palace courtyards, and a king who calls himself a shepherd of the people. In the same breath, he complains about taxes and labor drafts. He says Hammurabi fights wars not only for glory, but for river towns, canal gates, and the right to direct water across a border. In this land, control of water is control of life. One year, the village receives an order. Men must report for canal work under royal authority. You do not know the official term, but you know the feeling of your household running with one strong back missing. Your father leaves before dawn with a pick and a woven basket. He returns with blistered hands and a face gray with dust. The overseer says the canal will protect harvests, and he is not wrong. But you also learn the deeper truth. The state is built the way canals are built, one forced day of labor at a time. By the time your voice deepens, you can walk levies without looking down. You know where the ground is soft and where it is firm. You know which canal runs clear and which carries silt. You know the seasons by smell, the sharp green of new shoots, the dry sweetness of harvest straw, the sour tang of fermenting beer at festival time, and you know your childhood has been a rehearsal. Soon the world will widen, and you will see what Babylon's power looks like up close. Part 2. The City, the Tablet, and the King's Hand. When you're old enough to carry a full sack of barley without stopping, your world expands. It does not expand with a sudden adventure. It expands with errands, obligations, and the slow realization that your village is a cell in a larger body. A good harvest brings relief, but it also brings visitors, more officials, more measurements, more tablets. A bad harvest brings something worse than hunger, because hunger can be shared. Debt is private, and it can swallow a household. In late summer, after threshing, your father takes you to a market town upstream. You walk along a canal path where the bank is packed hard by generations of feet. Donkeys pass in both directions, their hooves clicking on baked earth. You smell dung, sweat, and the sharp sweetness of dates drying on mats. The town's gate is not a monument, but it is a statement. Mud brick walls, a watch platform, and guards with spears who look bored until someone looks too confident. Inside, the streets narrow and twist between houses, and the noise rises. Sellers shouting, children crying, goats bleating, metal tapping as a smith hammers a bronze blade into shape. This is where you see the bureaucracy up close. In a courtyard near the temple, men line up with baskets and jars to pay what they owe. A scribe sits on a low stool, stylus poised, and another man reads out names. The scribe is not a villain. He is a hinge in the system. He writes what is promised and what is delivered. He notes witnesses. He seals tablets. Without him, disputes become fights and taxes become raids. With him, the king's reach becomes predictable. Your father points out something you would otherwise miss. A notice about labor obligations. A tablet is displayed where people can see it, listing which households must send men to repair a canal section before the next flood season. The dates are not written as numbers you recognize. They are framed by the year name. The king's way of marking time by events, like the year Hammurabi dug the Great Canal, or the year he defeated a rival city. You realize then that history is being organized above your head, pressed into clay, so it cannot be forgotten or argued away. Not long after, you make your first journey to Babylon itself. It happens because a relative has a dispute that must be judged, and your family goes as witnesses. The trip is a lesson in geography. You travel by boat when you can, because water carries weight better than donkeys do. The river is wide, slow, and full of hidden currents. You pass reed beds where birds rise like thrown cloth. You pass fields where laborers bend in lines, their backs dark against the pale soil. You see flood marks on old walls and understand that even cities fear the river. Babylon is not the mythical city of later centuries, but it is already a center of gravity. Its walls are long and thick enough to make you feel small. The gates funnel people into controlled entry, and you are searched for weapons more out of routine than suspicion. Inside, the city is layered. Neighborhoods of mud brick houses, workshops that smell of tanning and dye, courtyards where women grind grain, and broad streets that lead toward temples and the palace district. You hear languages you do not speak. You see foreign merchants with different hairstyles and different gods stamped on their seals. For the first time, you grasp that Babylonian is not one face. It is a system that pulls many faces into one orbit. And then you see something that will stay in your mind for the rest of your life. A great stone stele, dark, hard stone, polished. At the top is a carved scene, the king standing before a god, receiving symbols of authority. Below, lines of writing cover the surface like a woven net. You cannot read them, but you understand what you are looking at. This is law made physical. This is a message to every traveler and every local. There are rules now written by the king, backed by the gods, and meant to outlast any single argument in a village courtyard. You do not learn the laws as a scholar would. You learn them the way villagers learn them, through consequences. An elder repeats a rule about loans and interest because someone lost a field. A neighbor warns you about accusation and evidence because he once paid silver to clear his name. You hear that judges can be punished for corrupt decisions, that false witnesses can be punished like the crime they tried to invent. You hear that the law protects property and hierarchy, that it recognizes slaves and free men and nobles, and that it is strict because the kingdom is trying to make itself legible. Back home, your own responsibilities shift. You begin to join men at the canal gates at dawn, deciding whose field is watered first and how to share shortages without bloodshed. You learn to look at the sky and the river level and guess what kind of year it will be. You learn that a single broken gate can ruin a season, and a single neglected ditch can salt a field for years. You also learn to keep a little barley aside, even when food feels plentiful, because the river can change its mind in a week. Then the king's demands arrive again, not as canal labor this time, but as military obligation. The message comes through the same channels: a messenger, an official, a scribe. Names are called. Households are counted. Equipment is specified: a spear, a bow if you have it, a shield of hide over wood, provisions for the march. You are not asked whether you want to go. In Hammurabi's kingdom, you are part of the land, and the land must defend itself. When your name is spoken, it does not feel like glory. It feels like your mother's hands gripping your arm too tightly. It feels like your father looking at your shoulders as if measuring whether they can carry more than sacks of grain. It feels like the canal water behind your house, moving steadily, indifferent to your fear. You have grown up inside an order that can settle disputes and build canals. Now you will learn that the same order can take you away from everything familiar and send you toward cities whose names you have only heard in stories. Part 3. The Levy, the March, and the Taste of Dust. You do not join the army the way later ages imagine. You are levied. The kingdom takes a season of your life the way it takes a portion of your grain. In your village, the summons arrives with witnesses and a tablet, because even fear must be organized. You are told where to assemble, what to bring, and what penalties follow if you do not appear. Your family helps you prepare. Your mother bakes hard loaves that will last. Your father sharpens a bronze spearhead, checks the haft for cracks, and fits it tight with resin and binding. If you have a bow, it is a simple composite of wood and horn, kept dry and cherished. Your shield is hide stretched over a wooden frame. Your protection is mostly wool and luck. At the assembly point, you see the state as a crowd. Men from villages like yours arrive in lines, each group under a local headman. Some look confident, some look sick, some look like they are already regretting every step. Officials check names. Scribes record rations. You are issued barley, dried dates, and sometimes beer in sealed jars. The professional soldiers stand apart. They are fewer, better equipped, and they move with the calm of people who have done this before. Many carry bronze helmets and heavier shields. They are the king's core. You, the levy, are the mass that makes the kingdom able to fight longer than a single city could. You march along the canals and the river roads because the army follows water the way a farmer does. The land is flat, but it is not easy. In dry stretches, the dust rises with every footfall and coats your mouth. In wet stretches, mosquitoes whine and you cannot sleep. At night, you camp in rough order. Fires are small because wood is precious on the plain. You eat barley porridge, chew dates, and drink water that tastes of silt. You learn quickly that the greatest enemy on a march is not another army. It is blisters, diarrhea, fever, and the simple fact that men need food every day. As you move, you hear the names of cities with the seriousness of targets. Larsa, Eshnuna, Marie. Towns and kingdoms that have their own gods, their own archives, their own pride. Under Hammurabi, Babylon is not merely defending itself, it is absorbing rivals, turning independent cities into provinces, and securing the arteries of trade and irrigation. You begin to understand that a campaign is not only a battle, it is a reordering of who collects taxes, who appoints judges, and whose king's year name will be used when people date their contracts. The first time you see a fortified city as an objective, your stomach tightens. Walls rise from the plain like a cliff made of mudbrick. A moat or canal may run along the base. Gates are narrow and defended. Banners move above the parapets. You realize how much work is stored in a wall, millions of bricks, each molded, dried, and carried by someone's hands. Taking a city means breaking that work or persuading the people behind it that surrender is safer than resistance. Siege work is slow and brutal, and it feels like labor draft turned into violence. You dig trenches and build ramps. You carry baskets of earth, just as you carried mud for canal banks at home, but now arrows hiss from above. You learn to keep your head low. You learn the different sounds of death. The thump of a stone from a sling, the sharp crack of a bowstring, the wet finality when a spear finds flesh. You are not a hero in a poem. You are a man trying to stay alive while doing the job assigned to you. When battle comes, it is confusing, loud and short compared to the waiting. Lines form, spears level, archers step forward, and loose volleys that darken the air for a heartbeat. Officers shout orders you cannot always hear. Somewhere to one side, chariots move, not as the main force, but as a fast striking arm. Two-wheeled vehicles pulled by equids, their drivers and fighters protected by better armor. The levee presses, shields overlapping, feet sliding in churned dust. You remember canal banks, how they can collapse under pressure, and you realize an army line can collapse the same way. Afterward, the field is a document no scribe can fully capture. Wounded men call for water. Friends look for friends. The dead are stripped of usable gear because bronze is valuable and war consumes metal. You help carry the injured and you discover a new kind of exhaustion. Not the honest fatigue of harvest, but the drained emptiness that comes from fear and shock. That night, the camp is quieter. Even the confident men speak softly, as if loud voices might summon the day back. In the weeks that follow, you see how victory becomes administration. If a city surrenders, gates open and officials enter with tablets and seals. Rations are assigned. Storehouses are inventoried. Local leaders are questioned, and if the king is wise, some are kept in place under new oversight. Soldiers are paid, sometimes in silver, sometimes in goods, sometimes in the promise of land. You hear proclamations that debts will be adjusted, that order will be restored, that the king brings justice. Some of it is sincere, some of it is strategy. Either way, you watch the Babylonian system sink roots. You also see what conquest does to ordinary people, because you are one of them. Farmers stand in doorways and stare as armed strangers pass. Women carry water and keep their eyes down. Children watch with the same curiosity you once had when the scribe came to your village. You understand then that every enemy city is a collection of households, fields, canals, and fears. In the evenings, you talk with men from other regions and realize how wide the world is. Some come from nearer the Zagros, where stone houses exist. Some come from marsh country, where people travel more by boat than by road, and reeds are as important as timber. When your unit is finally released for a season, you do not return as the same man who left. You return with calloused hands that now remember spearwood as well as plow handles. You return with scars you do not explain. You return with a sharper sense of how thin the line is between a harvest and a hunger year, between a village dispute and a royal judgment, between a canal repair order and a march to war. And as you step onto the familiar ridge by your home canal, you hear the water running and realize that the river never stopped while you were away. Your life did. Briefly, the rivers did not. Part 4. Return, judgment, and what remains after the king coming home is not an ending. It is a reintegration. You return to the same ridge, the same canal, the same fields, but you return with new eyes. The first thing you notice is how small the world is between your doorstep and the water gate, and how enormous it is beyond it. The second thing you notice is that the village has changed without you. A child you remember as an infant now runs barefoot with a reed flute. An elder has died and left a dispute behind him. Someone's field has been divided among sons, and the boundary stones have moved a finger width, just enough to start whispers. Your family receives you in the language of practical love. Your mother touches your face to confirm you are real. Your father asks about rations, routes, and whether the king's soldiers treated the levy fairly. He does not ask first about killing, because in this world people understand that soldiers do what soldiers must. What matters immediately is whether you can plant on time, whether you can repair the small canal breach that formed during the last flood, whether your household's obligations have accumulated like silt. The administration is still there, steady as the river. After harvest, the scribe comes again. He measures grain, records deliveries, and asks questions about a neighbor's debt. You realize that war and law are two arms of the same body. The kingdom expands by spear, and then it holds by tablet. Witnesses speak. A contract is made. Something that might have become a fight becomes a document instead. Not long after your return, you stand in a local court for the first time as an adult witness. A man claims his ox was stolen. Another man claims he bought it honestly. The judge listens, the scribe writes, and witnesses are pressed to speak truthfully because the law treats false testimony as a serious crime. You feel the tension in the air. In a village, reputations are as valuable as silver, and an accusation can poison a household. The judge asks for proof. A tablet of sale, a witness list, the marks of a seal. The case turns not on shouting, but on documentation. You understand then why Hammurabi's kingdom invests so much faith in clay. But you also see the hard edges. The law recognizes hierarchy. It does not treat all bodies as equal. A noble's injury and a commoner's injury are punished differently. A slave is property in many contexts, even if a slave can also marry, work, and hope. Women can own property and appear in court, but their safety often depends on male kin and community. In the village, fairness is not a theory. It is what keeps people from burning each other's houses. So the law matters even when it is imperfect, because it channels conflict into procedures instead of revenge. In the years that follow, you become what the state needs you to be: stable. You marry, your household expands, you teach children where to step on a canal bank and where not to, because one careless foot can collapse an edge. You teach them to respect measures, because a short measure invites curses and disputes. You teach them to recognize the rhythm of the year, plowing when the soil is ready, sowing before the moisture is gone, weeding before the shoots are choked, harvesting when the heads are heavy. You show them how to store grain in sealed jars and raised bins to keep out damp and rodents, because survival is often decided months before hunger arrives. You also teach them the geography of power. You point north and tell them there are cities along the Euphrates where the river narrows and the winds change. You point east and speak of the Zagros, where timber and stone come from, where traders bring metal and lapis and stories. You point south and describe marsh country, where reeds can be turned into boats, roofs, baskets, even armor for a moment. You tell them that Babylon sits like a knot in the middle of these roots, tying people together whether they like it or not, and you tell them that a king's orders travel along water faster than any man on foot. Every so often, another levy's summons comes, though not every year. Sometimes you go, sometimes another man goes. The village learns to rotate burden so no household collapses. You learn what older men already know. The state can be negotiated with at the edges, not by rebellion, but by persistence, petitions, and witnesses. People take complaints to officials. They travel to a town to speak to a judge. They bring tablets, seals, and testimony. This is not freedom as later ages define it, but it is agency inside the system. As Hammurabi grows older, you feel the weight of his reign in small ways. A canal is expanded, a boundary is clarified, a distant rival city becomes a province, and suddenly a new stream of grain and soldiers passes through your region. The king's name appears on more documents. The year names keep recording victories and works. You do not stand in the palace, but you live inside the consequences of palace decisions. You notice that trade feels safer on some routes because the kingdom enforces order. You also notice that demands can increase because administration becomes more capable of extracting what it wants. One evening, years later, you sit on your roof and listen to the canal running in the dark. Stars are sharp in the cooler air. In the distance, dogs bark and then stop. A child breathes beside you, and you realize the main truth of your life as a farmer under a great king. Most of history is not made in palaces. It is made in repeated actions that keep people alive. Digging, planting, repairing, testifying, marching when summoned, returning when released. Teaching the next generation how to read the land and fear the water. When people in later times speak of Hammurabi, they speak of laws carved in stone. You, if you could speak to them, would add something else. You would tell them that the law was only one face of the kingdom. The other face was mud on hands, sweat on backs, and the patient discipline of canal maintenance. You would tell them that conquest mattered because it rearranged who controlled water and who judged disputes. You would tell them that the Euphrates was always the true ruler and that every king, even Hammurabi, was ultimately negotiating with a river. And when your hair turns gray, your life narrows again to what it always was: fields, family, water, the familiar ridge, the sound of a gate opening to let life flow into furrows. You have seen cities, armies, and written law, but the day begins the same way: checking the canal level, reading the wind, and deciding what must be done before the sun becomes too hard to work under. That is what remains after the king: the work, the water, and the people who keep persuading the river to behave. Last reminder, if you made it this far, thank you for staying with the story. If you want more episodes like this, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. It signals that you want this series to continue, and it helps these historically grounded narrations reach more people.